This is Entrepreneurship 101, inspiring entrepreneurs to rise, innovate, and create lasting impact. I'm your host, Daniel Lucas, and our today's guest. She is information architecture expert from Silicon Valley, now in New York City. Her work focuses on diagnosing documentation breakdowns, architecting scalable publication systems, and other than Miss Susan Kraft-Yorke.
Thank you. Yes, thank you very much for having me on your podcast. I appreciate you recognizing this as something that belongs in your Entrepreneurship 101.
Yes, and thank you so much for being here, Miss Susan. And can you please introduce more about yourself that I missed?
Sure, sure. Well, I've been in Silicon Valley since before the web. I was working in tech pubs, which I moved to because I love to understand how things work. Before that, I was a research physicist working in labs and realized that I was right next to Silicon Valley. It seemed like a lot more fun, excitement going on over there. So I jumped out of my PhD program at UC Santa Cruz, went back to Palo Alto where I'd started before in research, and then just jumped into tech. So from there, it's been a long story, and I've witnessed all of it, from the growth of the internet to from the growth of just not just internet itself, but from communication paths to the internet to now the AI and the qubits, and it's been exciting and lovely. And I moved out of Silicon Valley after all of those decades to be on the East Coast, just to have a change and to get a little more space. Believe it or not,
Hmm.
Silicon Valley is extremely packed full of cars and people and ideas and constant chat. And after a while, you just need a break from it.
Definitely, we need a break, people. And Miss Susan, thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and wisdom to us. Here, we salute you, we celebrate you. Thank you. So today, let's talk about the hats that we mentioned, being a Silicon Valley veteran and an information architect on mission to save companies from drowning into explosion of documents. You call it a search tax.
Yes.
What exactly is it, and why did don't most leaders know it exists?
It's a hidden problem. For there's two reasons. One is that leadership rarely looks at documentation. It's they're still using it's not leadership CEO because they depend on the next C-suite to take care of all the organization of corporations. And
Hmm.
accounting still keeps people that write documents in the script version where during the industrial revolution there are people who wrote memos and letters and filed contracts, things like this. So it has never left the cost center. And even though the information that is developed by people like myself, knowledge experts, sit hand in hand with the engineers as they're building out the systems. I work in the back. I've always worked in the back end, by the way.
Hmm.
So because I started out before there was a front end, and that are those are assets. You can't sell your software without somebody describing how it works, even if it's for other engineers, because the way engineers describe it to each other who they're working with, they kind of know the ins and outs and the sideways in, but people that are not in the company don't understand how it works until you lay it out for them. And people like me figure out how things work, put in a workflow, put in diagrams, explain to other people that understand what those engineers who built it understand. So that is those are assets, and you can't sell the product, the software product or the hardware product, without some understanding of how it works. However, because it's still in a cost center, because writers are still in cost center, it's just like they're buying themselves up. And I don't know how to get into that area because I'm not an accountant, I'm not a CFO person. I'm trying to get the word out with people like you, so hopefully it'll get over there. Because here's the real bottom line: after we left paper and went online and wikis were developed, wiki was developed specifically to get documentation from a control center. Except what that engineer didn't understand what the control center was they manage that, all the information. So you could ask for any version of anything. Could be a BOM, bill of materials. It could be a user quick start guide. It could be how the system works at a architectural level. They could pull it up for you within minutes. But now it depends on where the person who wrote it put it, and how long
Mm-hmm.
ago they put it there, and did it get overwritten, and was it upgraded, did somebody sign off. When they had the document control center, that was all taken care of. But we don't have a centralized version of that anymore because we got wikis. So now what has been recorded, and this has been going on ever since we started wikis, and it's only gotten worse with AI. It's gotten about
Mm-hmm.
20% worse. On the average, 20% payroll leakage by people looking for documentation. 20%. That's a lot of money. And it goes
Mm-hmm.
unmanaged. And people now think, well, that's just the way it is. It's always been that way. Well, if you started this way, sure, but it doesn't have to be that way. Just because it's always been that way doesn't mean you have to keep it that way. And you're losing a lot of money because sometimes, I may continue, sometimes someone will grab the wrong version. Maybe it was before a patch or before the last upgrade because they weren't in tune with what's going on with engineering, because they're over in sales or they're in marketing or they're an account manager. And those are different groups of people that are not integrated with engineers like the technical writer knowledge expert is. So, and I've seen this happen. One time I went to a large company, large insurance company, very large, very old insurance company. They had an architectural diagram that looked like a spaghetti diagram that was written 4 years prior to me arriving. They didn't know who the original author was, and they didn't know where the original document was. They just had this one PDF, and it had every single package that they sold. So they would buy small companies that had solutions for things. Oh yeah, we want to be in that area. Oh yeah, we want to be in that area. And they would just glue it into their system with some APIs. But they didn't know if all of it worked or not. They only had this really crazy diagram. So they brought me in to sort it all out, go through every single strand and make sure it still worked, and then redraw it so it looked like, this is what I was asked for, looked like a subway map instead of the spaghetti diagram. So those are things that happen. And that, I don't know what was going on with their company. I'm sure they're having a lot of problems because they didn't know where everything was. So that's what you would call information tax. Now, I was told by a CFO acquaintance of mine who gives me advice. She said, don't use tax, because people in accounting and CFO, they think of tax as very specific, and it's a very hard word to attach. But for people like us outside of accounting, we get it. So she advised I refrain from calling it a information tax, but call it leakage. That's why I changed it to, so you see here on the screen, leakage or expense, operating expense or payroll spend. Those are terms that relate to that people in accounting and CFO can understand and then really get to them. People like us, we see it as tax. Yeah, we get it. So
So, when you talk into organization, what is the first thing you look for? Understand the information. Well, maturity, Miss Susan.
there is a test I have for them, and it's pretty complicated. I have it on this in my site here as well. There's 5 different layers, and this is something that Gartner came up with many years ago, a couple of decades ago. But how organized you are with your information. Is your information cohesive through different departments? Within the same department, are you using the same language? Do you talk about these items you have in your company the same way across the company and out to the customer? And usually, young companies, startups don't, right? They have their own little words for use, their nicknames for things, and they might actually get into their documentation because that's how they think about it. And then when it gets to sales, they might change it to what they think is better for sales, or marketing comes up with terminology. Let's fast forward to the 5th version. The highest level of organization of documentation reflects to the highest level organization of a company, and it's a one-for-one mirror. If you're unorganized in your way you talk about your systems and your product within the company, you have a very unorganized company. It's just they're the ones that figured it out. Gartner, very highly regarded company that looks at these things deeply, and So I can take that along with I'll do a survey and or some sort of a way to get information out of the company, like where are you, like how organized are you, how do people in your company, usually at management level, see your information system. I've done these surveys and sometimes they're pretty sad, they're very unhappy about what's going on, and they're very relieved to see me come in and they want to talk about it. Sometimes it's like a therapy session. I've had a 2 hour Q&A per session with one person who was in a startup, was 4 years old, and they'd been there since the beginning, and they had so much to tell me. And other people gave me 15 minutes about what they liked and didn't like. So that's what you do. You go in and find the information. There's different ways of looking for information depending on what your time frame is and how large of a space you're looking at. And then you, if they want to know, you can map it to the maturity level model. And if they don't care about that, they just want it done, then you skip that part. You just go into mapping out what needs to be migrated and how they want to look when they're done. I can give them suggestions, but they might have constraints on the platforms they can use. For instance, if you're in finance, you might be restricted to Microsoft, or healthcare is the same way, Microsoft, because they trust it and they know Microsoft and they know it's a nice contained secure system. And then you've got SharePoint, pretty much. If some people are very dedicated to Atlassian, so then you've got Confluence instead of other wikis. And then you have to be organized and how you're going to, you have to present the way you're going to put this information. Everyone has to be on board and you can't come off of this style. And other companies are more sophisticated in tech. They might go with a GitHub. It's called Docs as Code style, and that's the way I like it the best because that seems to be the most efficient, especially when you're working with engineers, because they can look at the documentation very easily that way. It sits right alongside the code.
Well said, Miss Susan. So, what does information that would mean, and how does quietly undermine a company's credibility over time?
You're asking two questions about what describes Deadwood, and what was the second question?
What will be the quietly undermine a company's credibility?
Okay, so the Deadwood would be articles or documents that anyone can still access without it being clearly recognized as a older piece that's been archived or no longer useful. And then they might grab it and share it with people inside the company, and now you're out of sync with what's really going on. Or you might even share it with a client, which I've seen happen, and that causes all sorts of problems, including misinformation and misuse of the product because they've got old information. And then when they finally realize what's going on, now you've got penalties to pay. And then now they don't trust you anymore. And eventually they might even leave you. And I've seen that happen too, because they can't trust you because they don't know that you know, they know that you don't understand how to manage your information. And they depend on the information in order to use the product. And some of these are very sophisticated, like maybe cloud services or maybe a security setup. So how are you going to trust your company that you're investing millions of dollars in for your own company, for your growth, if you can't trust what you're getting, even though you know that product is really good, but how are you going to use it?
Certainly, how do people use it? That's a big question. What exactly is information architecture, and why should leaders outside of IT care about it?
Information architecture is pretty much what it says, or you're architecting how your information is placed and accessed and managed. So when
Mhm.
I say architecture, it's just designing. So you take time to think about where you're putting your information. So when a company first starts, and I've been in a lot of startups, when you've got a team of 20 people or 30 people, everyone knows what everybody else knows. And you come up with a system of how it works, where you put things, and then you double, and then you double, and then you double. In a year, you went from 30 people, now you've got 120 people. And that 120th person has no idea where things are, even though the core people seem very confident and easy to get things. And then they're not taking care of it anymore, the core people, because they're rising up in management. And now the newer people are just left to wander around the forest of information and hope that they are accessing the right thing at the right time and they haven't left anything out, and they hope they're putting things in archives the way they're supposed to when things age out, but they don't really know, because now you don't even have a workflow written down, right? So now you've got somebody like me would come in at the 120th person, look at what's going on, figure out the workflow, write it out, let people see what we're doing, make sure management agrees that what I've described is correct, and do you want me to make it more efficient? And sometimes they are so busy that they can't take time to make it efficient because they are growing really fast. Sometimes they're stuck because of this inefficiency. Yeah, we need to be more efficient because we are getting backlogged because of this problem. So it depends on where they are in their stage of growth and their uh, most companies want the next quarter to be successful. So they have a hard time, especially when they're scrabbling. They have a hard time looking to the next year or trying to build out something for the next, a year from now. When they're working, they're trying to solve problems today. It takes foresight and cash management in order to get this sort of thing sorted out. Did I answer your question for what information architecture is?
Indeed, Miss Susan. And
Thank you.
you said documentation teams should work with engineers, not after them. How does AI change that relationship?
Okay, so so now what's happened over the last year has been pretty widely known that companies would lay off the entire technical writer groups, not
Mm-hmm.
understanding, because this is over in finance. They're trying to cut costs. Remember what I said earlier? They're in the cost center. They cut costs so they can pay for their tokens in AI. So,
Mm-hmm.
hey, this is a win-win. AI is going to write for us. AI is going to store information for us. We don't need this. This is the easiest swap out right here. Let's get rid of them. So now we have no one to read what AI is writing to make sure it's actually correct, not hallucinating. And is it using the right style guide? Because you don't want to have everything to look the same. You want to have different styles depending on what kind of information, who's reading it, how deep, how new they are, how experienced they are. It's all very different. Different audiences. We got an end member versus was like uh, not an engineer versus something you're writing for engineers, like a product, like an API you're writing for other engineers to use because you're selling
Mm-hmm.
APIs. So who is going to read what AI produced quickly, really fast, right? So now you get this big pile of AI produced documentation. Who reads that stuff? Engineers? They're busy doing it. They're busy managing their own AI agents to create more document, well, make more product. And also they're probably doing the AI documentation of the product they just created. So now they're starting to bring uh, writers back, except the titles have changed. Now we're editors. Now we are knowledge management experts. And I think that might be their way of moving knowledge management writers out of the writer category, which is automatically put in cost centers, into the same asset management classification that software developers are. So I think there's just kind of organically shifting, it seems to me. Um, but yeah, somebody has to read this stuff, especially. I mean, everybody has tried. I mean, everybody in your group here, I'm sure, has tried AI, and you can see that pretty soon it looks the same. In fact, there's articles and radio shows about this as well that talk
Mm-hmm.
about things are looking all vanilla. Where is the creativity? Where is the secret sauce that makes it this company or this product or this area of the product? It's all generic and using the same language and overblown, and maybe there's some hallucinations in there. So that's what's happening with writers in the age fight. One more I might say is that there is something called RAG, and that is a tool that retrieves information. It looks at everything and it pulls information for the person using it. Now, what happens if you use RAG before you have an architected information system? It can grab anything from everywhere, and now it has old stuff, new stuff, unmanaged stuff, uh, something that hasn't gone through the okey doke system, right? Like, yeah, that's correct. I like it. What happens if it's something that's stubbed out and never finished? And now it's all in a big pile of this is our information, and they're using all of that. So that's why you need to have IA before AI, um, to organize things before you let loose these very fast algorithms and systems.
Well said, Miss Susan. Yes, people, please do listen to our one of our episode on AI 101 where we talk about hallucinating. And Miss Susan, to wrap up our discussion for today, what is the one question every leader should ask their team tomorrow to uncover their own search tags?
Uh, well, what every leader should do is be aware of the research that's been done across all industries that shows this pattern of the labor capacity leakage or search task, because it can go from 15% up to 30%, and that was before AI. It's consistent. Now there's new data coming out that it's gone up to 40% looking for things because there's so much to go through. And if you're being served up all these things, you have to read it to see if it's what you want. And what happens if it's this bloated stuff? So, what do they need to do? They need to understand what their labor capacity leakage is because of unmanaged information. And how do they do that? They need to have a survey. They need to have somebody come in, or in the company, they can pick somebody. Hey, you seem pretty organized. Can you just go through this? You're a business analyst. Look and see what is our payroll leakage by people in our company looking for information.
Well said again. Ms. Susan, so can you please invite our listeners to support your projects, your business, or anything you want to promote on Entrepreneurship 101?
Well, they can contact me if they would like some advice or if they'd like somebody to come in and help with your problems. If you scroll to the bottom, at the very bottom of this page, you'll see here, right there. Go back up a little bit, up one more header, right there. So those are the references I'm talking about. Go down a little bit. Most cited references. So this is what I'm talking about. Those references. Those are the classic references that people build on. So if you want to actually read what's happening, why this is, and here's the Gartner um, information, you can look at these two references I have, or do a search on Gartner and on their on documentation and uh, level of company uh, level of company organization. And what we can do together is to look at your documentation and your all your information, your knowledge based documents, your getting started, your onboarding, all those things. Because if you have a bad onboarding, you're going to waste somebody's time and they're not going to really onboard well. They're going to be struggling for months to figure out things on their own. I can help you with that.
Indeed, people, let's connect with Miss Susan. And I have one more question before I will let you go. You've been in Silicon Valley for 30 years. Why is that moment with AI, remote work, and document explosion different from anything you've seen before?
This is the only thing comparable. Let's say comparable first is when the .com boom bust happened. Um, we learned from that, and that was letting companies go untethered with new stuff, which was the web, and how they were misusing funds. And we're seeing this happening now, where people are misusing tokens. But this is at a grander scale. This is like 10 times, 100 times more expensive and explosive and disruptive to the industry. Um, in the meantime, while they're sorting things out, my advice is to understand how AI works, understand agents, understand AI generalists. That's where I'm going. Actually, I'm also folding it into my toolkit. I'm about to take a boot camp in AI generalist this coming weeks. This takes a couple of weeks of solid time. That's what I would say, is that we just have to don't fear it. There's a lot of fear mongering going on out there. I'm not sure what, there's reasons why. I don't know what they are. I'm not that kind of researcher, but there's a lot of fear about AI. It's going to work for you if you know how it works. If you understand something, then you won't be fearful. And that's really where it comes in. Just learn it. It's not that difficult. You can do it.
Well said, Miss Susan. And again, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you very much for having me on your podcast. I appreciate it.
Maricam people, see you soon.
All
And I
right.
will invite you again, Miss Susan, to my other